Hello there, welcome back to another Reacting to Reactors, and this time we're doing Sam at every size, and the reason we are doing that is because Sam hit my archaeology button. So this one is Historic Statue Proves Fatness Was Beautiful, Fat Acceptance TikTok Cringe. I'm always here for somebody else pulling up fat acceptance TikToks for me to look at because, yep. So I want to look at this. I have ranted about the Venus of Willendorf statue before. There's many more of those throughout the world. Some of them are fat, some of them are not. Keep that in mind. But we're going to specifically talk about the one that's uber famous because I think it was like one of the first ones discovered. And we're gonna talk about it. And you're going to get an archaeology lecture, whether you want it or not. And if you don't like it, feel free to not watch. But if you're going to stick around, you may as well like and subscribe. See what I did there? All right, anyway. Liking and subscribing is like the best. Well, liking specifically is the best way you can support the channel. And subscribing also helps. So, yeah, there's that. Let's get into this. I don't want to spend forever on this. Anyway, this is Sam at Every Size. I very much like Sam at Every Size. Sam at Every Size took on, I'm just going to say Sam. Sam took on the Fearing the Black Body book, which was not a good book. It was inaccurate. It was biased. It twisted facts about things. It took an individual who was an outlier within their own culture, let alone Victorian culture at the time, and turned that individual into a siren call for fat acceptance and this whole concept that like not liking fatness is being racist. It's not. The woman that the book is about, she wasn't even brought over because she was fat necessarily. She just had some very highlighted parts of her body, specifically her genitalia, that were very intriguing to the Victorians, who were all a bunch of butt munches at the time. Well, I mean, in general, they were just a bunch of butt munches. Anything that's wrong with society today can almost be tracked back to the Victorian era, like hands down. Like all of these problematic issues we actually have in society today that are still sticking around is very Victorian. And yeah, you can blame the Victorians for damn near anything. All right. But that being said, the woman who wrote the book, in my opinion, did a bad job of it. And I don't think fully understood the topic that she was writing about. But it's really hard to be critical of that kind of stuff, just in today's society, especially because the author herself was African-American, actually black. I think we go with black, not African-American. Not all black people are African, okay? I've been told that on multiple occasions at this point. But the author of the book herself is black. And so sometimes being someone who is white and going after a black author, it doesn't come off correctly, even if your criticisms are valid. So I applaud Sam for doing that and doing a good job of it, being very professional about her criticisms about the book. And yeah, if you haven't read the book, please go read it. I'm not going to tell you not to read a book, but do keep in mind that it's not accurate. And what you're reading is someone's very biased opinion on a small part of history that doesn't necessarily line up with reality. So there's that. So yeah, that being the, that laying the groundwork for this video, that's basically what's happening right now is people are taking and have always taken the Venus of Willendorf's statue. Correcting myself. It's the Venus of Willendorf. Bear with me. But people have throughout history, because we've had this particular artifact around for a while now, but people have always tried to interpret the Venus of Willendorf to suit their needs. Sometimes it's evidence of a goddess culture. Sometimes it's some like to say it's evidence of a matriarchal society in the past. Some people like to say it's showing that fatness is beauty. Some are trying to say all kinds of things. What we know about it archaeologically is that it exists, and we've found it, and we've found other statues that fall into roughly the same category, where they are small, roughly the size of your hand, images, statues almost all of them look feminine in that they have what appear to be breasts and a, vagina. I just don't know what I'm allowed to say anymore that YouTube won't kick the video for. But they have female body parts, female genitalia. Sometimes they'll have hair. Sometimes they'll have what we think are decorative caps. It could just be a way of depicting hair. That's the thing. We're not entirely sure what they are for or what they are actually depicting. They could be goddess statues. They could be fertility statues. They could be carvings that people made to remind them of people in their family. The Venus of Willendorf in particular, some have made the suggestion that it is the depiction of a pregnant woman. So there's also been, I remember reading a paper where they were saying that the figure had been carved by the woman herself because they were taking pictures of what it would look like if you looked down your body and what you would see if you looked directly down your own body, and then took the same kind of shots of the statue at the same kind of an angle. It was an interesting take. Again, there's no way for us to prove 100% what this thing is for or any of these statues are for, unless we find them in some kind of context, which to my understanding we have not. Some we've found in burials, some we've found in like wells, some we've found in like just basically the ground. So we're finding them in all kinds of different ways. We're finding them looking all kinds of different ways. Pretty much the only things they have in common is their size and that they are almost universally depicting women. You can interpret that any way you want. It's not evidence of anything in particular. Okay. What we know is they exist. We find them and they're kind of cool to look at. If you've never seen them, I've gotten to see, it wasn't the Willendorf statue, but I got to see a couple other ones, and they are really cool. Considering how incredibly old they are, they're so cool to look at. They're very detailed. You would be surprised at how detailed they are considering. But yeah, I mean, if you ever get a chance to go see these things in real life, please go do so. It's one of those things. You just need to do it in your lifetime because it just changes your perspective on things. And it's such a small thing that just kind of changes your perspective about history and humanity and all that kind of stuff. It's not going to rock your life and you're not going to become the Buddha or anything, but it is something that's really impressive. And I think everyone should do. Okay, I think 10 minutes of rambling is enough. Yeah, let's get into this and see what Sam has to say. I have Sam sped up at time and a quarter just because I kind of want to get through this pretty quickly. And let's go. Also, Sam talks really slow. I love her, but she talks slow.
Fun fact, you couldn't really just DoorDash food to your igloo or your cave.
Nope.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel.
Though, I'm just being pedantic here. The hunting party could technically be viewed like a DoorDash, and they could have brought large game back to your house. I suppose they would bring it back to the village in general, but I'm just being silly.
My name is Sam. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. I'm so happy to have you here with me again this week. If you are new here and this is the first time you are seeing my face, welcome. I make weekly videos dissecting internet nonsense, so if you're into that type of thing or you like today's video, I hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing. It really helps out the channel and make sure that you never miss another upload from me. So it's been a little while since I got to utilize my little history nerd brain for the channel. And you guys know I really love doing those historical deep dives. But until now, I hadn't really had a good topic to really express.
I think Sam's, at least their undergraduate, is in history. I don't know if Sam has a higher degree. It doesn't matter. I just know that they have creds. They've got street cred, y'all. That's all I know.
That part of my brain. Until today. For any of you who don't know, I have a bachelor's degree in history. It's something that I just really love getting to deep dive into. And like I said, I don't get to do it very often, but when I do, it's a lot of fun. And for some...
Oh, if I didn't mention it, I'm an anthropologist by training, an archaeologist by profession, and retired. And yeah, so I have a big interest in archaeology and history as well as human culture and humanity. So she and I are kind of on like the same level. It's just she's like way more into the history aspect of it, and I'm way more into like the material culture, society. Why do we do that aspect of it? That's the major difference here.
Fat activists really love clinging to historical artifacts or figures to kind of prove their point that fatness used to be an ideal body or beauty standard. And so today we're going to look at one of those artifacts. So what exactly are we going to be talking about? Well, I stumbled across a TikToker this weekend who she's doing some sort of series about promoting obesity, which is just annoying. But within that, she shared this clip.
My second favorite thing about being fat is the curves of my body. This is a Venus figurine dating back to the Paleolithic era, depicting the ideal feminine.
It doesn't. Tell me you don't know what you're talking about without telling me you don't know what you're talking about. We have no idea. I've already had my little rant about it. We have no idea what this is depicting at all. We know that this is a woman based on the quite obvious genitalia. So what we are looking at here, as far as what we think we're looking at here archaeologically, so obviously I would think this is a naked body, at least naked to a degree. These are the breasts, or the chesticles, as some like to say. These appear to be the hands, so they seem to have their hands resting on top of their chest. And then if they were to turn it to the side, you would see that these continue down to the side. There's like a little, well, you know, an elbow joint, and then it comes back up to the shoulders here. There is no neck. This is the neck right here. There's no facial features either. And this has been debated to be either a cap, a knitted cap of some variety, or possibly like a tight braid of hair. We're fence sitting on that one too. There's arguments for, there's arguments against. They're both decent arguments. This is a belly button. This is a hole. It's not a functional. It's just damage to the thing. But the person, this woman, whoever she is, does have very accentuated curves. Curves is not really the word I would use here. It's kind of like a circle, to be perfectly honest. And then the feet taper down. I think her head's going to be in the way for it too much. The feet taper down, and they're just kind of like dainty, tiny little pointed ballet feet. But the thigh and the buttocks area is also very defined on the back. And they do kind of have like chunky calves, but this is a one-off. We have one Venus of Willendorf. There are others that have been found throughout the world. And let me find out exactly how many of them there are. There are roughly 200 of them throughout the entire world and all of human history. Okay? You can have 200 of something in your apartment. You could have 200 books in your apartment, and it really won't take up that much space, is kind of my point. These things are very small. Like I said, the largest one is slightly bigger than a Barbie doll. Okay? Slightly taller than a Barbie doll. And they don't all depict Rubenesque women, okay? They're almost all, well, I mean, they're called Venus statues for a reason. They all depict the female form, but not all of them are chunky. This one in particular, I think this is the first one ever found, clearly is depicting someone of size. This is one of 200. My point is, this is a very small percentage of art. And on top of it, it's prehistoric art, which means we don't have a lot of remaining prehistoric art as far as like physical objects. And even the cave art and that kind of thing, the rock art and that, we don't have a ton of that either. These things don't survive well. So my point is we don't know how common this type of an object would have been back in its heyday. This really could just be a one-off, and it just happened to be preserved. You know, it just happened to be the one thing that didn't get destroyed or disintegrated over time. Okay. So this is unique and it's special, and we need to preserve and study it along with the other 200 objects, the other 200 statues, figurines, I should say. And that's important, but they're not all found together. They're not all, it's not like we found a big old cache of them somewhere. Some of them are found together. Some of them are not. They're scattered throughout most of Europe. I think some of them even go into the Asian continents. I mean, they're everywhere. There's that. So assigning it as being the ideal feminine is incorrect in so many ways. Like, I can't even start to list them all for you. And this clinging to it, like, okay, you're going to cling to the Venus of Willendorf as your depiction of the perfect feminine. What are you going to do when you look at one of the other figurines who's slightly more svelte? Is that somehow depicting the ideal feminine as very tiny? Like, is this the ideal feminine? You're clinging to this one, but you're ignoring all of the other ones that have tiny waists or who are in general are just stick thin. Okay? Because they exist. There's all kinds of body shapes, which means if these are depicting women, they might be depicting individual women throughout time, you know? That kind of a thing. Which means it's not the ideal feminine. It also means that the stick thin ones are not the ideal feminine. We don't know what they're depicting. It could be the girlfriend. It could be the mother. It could be a sister figure. It could be a real life figure. It could be it could be a goddess figure. It could be a spirit thing. It could be pornographic. We don't know. You know, it's that kind of a thing. She might be holding up like the world's earliest piece of porn and going, this is the ideal feminine. No, you're basically holding up a prehistoric Playboy. Good job. I mean, I guess in that aspect, it's the ideal feminine, but it's not doing what you think it's doing. Good job. Good job. Anyway, I'll let Sam continue.
Bitch, I look like that.
Also, before we get in too deep to the historical part of this thing, I just have to, you guys, I can't even make this up. This TikToker on her page, these two TikToks literally exist right next to each other. Let me just show you this clip.
Not to get all woo-woo and like deep, because I'm very comfortable with the fact that I know barely anything.
Glad she's at least willing to admit that she doesn't know anything. Maybe she'll learn something today. Okay, so the figurine that she showed in her clip in that TikTok,
like I said, tell me you don't know anything without telling me you don't know anything.
Is known as Venus of Willendorf, and she is approximately 25,000.
Come on, really? Oh, for crimey's sake. Do we really have to do this on YouTube? Anyway, here's some nice shots of the side view. I mean, they do. Look at that booty. You got that booty. But, I mean, it's very depicting of the thigh. And then these teeny tiny little feet. But her hands here, I was saying, like, look how thin her arms are here. But these are her hands coming down to her elbow joint, coming back up to her shoulders. We got a booty. We got nice thighs. We got a booty. You know, we've got nice big mammalial glands, a nice round belly. And then the hair cap actually is kind of interesting to me because I can see it being a cap. I can see it being a quick depiction of hair, considering how, like, abstract this figurine actually ends up being when you really get to looking at it. I don't think it has nipples, guys. I don't know why those are there. I don't think it has nipples. But it has no facial features, and even the hands are very abstractly designed, and they're also very long. Like, no one's fingers actually go from, like, this part of their shoulder all the way to the middle of their chests. So it's not the perfect depiction of a body. So if we're already exaggerating the hands, we're exaggerating the feet, we're doing a quick and dirty for the hair, there are no facial features. Why can't we be exaggerating the rest of the body as well, is kind of my point. Maybe this is someone's ideal feminine, but that doesn't mean it's everyone's ideal feminine. All right. It doesn't even have to be ideal feminine. We don't know, and neither do you, is my point.
Into 30,000 years old. She's 4.4 inches or 11.1 centimeters tall and was found in Austria, though she is believed to have originated in either Italy or Ukraine based on the type of limestone material she was sculpted from. This isn't the first time that we've seen fat acceptance kind of latch on to historical artifacts, or even the idea of Venus promoting that fatness was more acceptable at some point in history. Most notably, we saw that when we covered Fearing the Black Body here on the channel. But I find it interesting that even Dr. Strings did not touch this piece. Like, she didn't even get close to it. And that very well could be because Venus of Willendorf is a prehistoric artifact. And for anyone who doesn't know, prehistoric just means that the piece existed before we had written records. So prehistory is pre-written record. History is once we have written record in the field. Because of the lack of written record, prehistorians tend to work a lot with theories. And the truth is, that's really all they have to go off of, because there's nothing written firsthand from those time periods, right? There's no booklet that comes with these figurines saying precisely what they were used for or why.
Music to my ears. This is why I like Sam.
So let's actually walk through some of those theories related to the Venus of Willendorf and talk through why it's absolutely nonsensical for fat activists to hold on to this figurine, this piece of the past, to try to make their argument that at one point in time, fatness was desirable. First, let's discuss their fixation on this one figurine. What they always fail to mention are that there are more than 200 of these figurines, and they've been...
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so that's the scatter pattern of them that have been found. Okay, we've got one that's all the way. We've got let's see, we've got two over here in the Asian continent. We've got, I think that might be the Venus, Willendorf. No, Austria's down here, dumbass. I don't know what that is. Don't listen to me. We've got one down here in Saudi Arabia. Most of them are found on the European continent, or the European section of the continent. We've got one all the way down here in, what is that, Italy? I don't know. Where's Russia? I'm American, can you tell? Anyway, the spread pattern for these goes, I mean, granted, these are like individual finds, and there might be multiples there, but these are definitely, there was at least one in each one of these locations, but clearly the collection, the majority of them are here. But these are just as valid as far as data points, because there's only 200 of them in the world, okay? Anyway, I won't stop stressing that enough.
Discovered all throughout Europe and Asia.
I hope
While
she
they
shows
do
pictures
mostly
of some of the
depict
other ones.
women, there are statues of males as well as human-animal hybrids. Additionally, they are not all fat. Some are tall and slender. Many do not have heads. Many don't have feet. And historians think that each figure was sculpted with purpose and intent.
Okay, with the head and the feet thing, I feel like that's slightly misleading. The head and the feet, like you saw on the Venus statue, the Willendorf statue, the neck and the ankles tend to be a more fragile joint than the midsection, for example. So if you were going to lose a piece of a figurine like this due to damage, and some of these I think are made out of wood on top of it, but if you were going to lose a piece of it due to some kind of damage, it's going to be probably the head and the tiny little delicate feetsy beats. So I don't want people to walk away from this thinking that like they were purposefully designed and carved without heads or feet, because that's not necessarily true. Some of them might have. I don't know what every single one of these look like, but I'm pretty sure the majority of them that are headless and footless are probably because of damage over time, not necessarily with us pulling them out of the ground. Could be. But it's probably got more to do with just, you know, eons worth of damage versus not having them in the first place. So I just want to clarify that point, not intentionally misleading. It just kind of, if you're not thinking about it, it might come off that way. Anyway.
Tension.
Onward.
And that the shapes were not created from a lack of skill. The reason it's important to note this is that it's not really possible to know whether or not this depicted fatness as an ideal body type, right? Because if they were indeed basing these off of body types, We've just heard that there were a whole bunch of them, but there were also human-animal hybrids, so maybe they're not based on reality at all.
Are they really lumping those in with the Venus statues? It was my understanding they're called Venus statues specifically because they are female. So the fact that there are male statues and hybrid statues, unless the hybrid statue has female markers on it, I could see that. But this is the first I've heard about there being males. Maybe it's a hermaphrodite thing, but I'd have to see the figure. And I don't know which one we're talking about.
Look at why this is so hard to nail down. Let's start by looking at the period in time in which these figurines would have come to exist. At the point of filming this video, it is theorized that these were utilized by people called the Gravitians. These hunter-gatherers lived during a bitterly cold period in Europe. Those residing in Western Europe tended to live in caves, while those in Eastern Europe tended to live in open-air camps or sites and are known mammoth hunters. They were nomadic in nature, moving around Europe before agricultural societies really existed.
I want you guys to take into account, though, the map that she showed of the Gravitians' known sites, which is what the map with the black dots were, compared to this colored map with the red dots, which represents the discovery of the various statues. The Gravitian map stops somewhere over here. Okay. And we've still got these three and this dude down here. It could be trade. Okay. It's so far back. Like Sam is saying, this stuff is so far back. We're just working on theories at this point. But typically this appears when we're looking at trade patterns, and I understand that trade is a hard thing for people to fully grasp. I don't mean that in a weird way, but when we modernly think of trade, we think of big boats of stuff coming from one country to another country, or like train freight taking goods from one end to the other. This is similar in a concept, but it's like these Gravitians are interacting with another group of people and they're trading goods with them. And this is the result of it. And it could be like this group traded. Let's pretend like these are groups. This group traded with this group. They kept some of those statues, but one of them got traded over here. And then they traded with somebody over here who traded with this group of people, who then traded with this group of people. It's like a telephone. It's a game of telephone, only with objects. So this doodad over here could be identical to a doodad from over here, but just because of trade patterns, it could have spread all the way over there. It could also be, I don't know anything about this, because again, everything I just told you could be absolute daydreams, because really, honestly, in the end, all it is a theory. Okay. So there's that. Sourcing the material that the Venus of Willendorf was made out of. Remember, she said it was found in Austria, but they think that the statue may have originated from a different area based on the type of stone. It's really cool that they can do that. They basically do a chemical breakdown of it. And that might be what that hole in the chest was a sample. But that really only tells us where the source material came from. It still doesn't tell us that she was like that statue wasn't necessarily made where the source material came from. That could have just been traded or picked up at some point and then carried along and then found its way into becoming a figurine. This stuff is really complicated is what I'm trying to tell you. So and Sam is covering most of it. I'm just basically reiterating things that she's saying. So I'm just going to let Sam finish.
If these figurines depicted what women actually looked like, it might make sense that they'd try to put on extra weight due to the bitter cold. But also if they were pregnant or focused on fertility. There was probably an emphasis on making sure they had extra weight stores on their body to keep them alive.
Again, all of this is theory. I'm not saying she's wrong. I'm not saying any of this is wrong. I'm just saying all of this is theory, and it's not theory like theory of gravity theory. It's like theory because we don't have enough evidence to make it a fact. There are no facts, but there are viable hypotheses and non-viable ones, and this is just what we're doing. This is a okay. This is a hypothesis. This isn't like a solid fact, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
And keep their babies healthy until their next meal. But there's not evidence that this is what women looked like during these time periods. Scientists recently did bone comparisons of prehistoric women and discovered that they would resemble female athletes today in their bone density and potential muscle mass.
This is what I did. I did this stuff. I didn't do this study, but this is what I did.
Which makes sense since these women would be moving with the men to hunt and were likely charged with using the heavy hides to make clothing, gathering plants, and assisting when they did finally begin to farm.
And also there's ample evidence that women were, it wasn't that they were just following the men, they were hunting as well. So these are not passive women that were just sitting around waiting for a dude to come along and throw a big chunk of meat in front of her. They were getting the meat themselves, is what I'm saying. Sisters were doing it for themselves. And have been for a very long time. So there you have it. And like I said, we have ample evidence of this. It's not up for debate.
When you start to put these theories into perspective and start to build context around the time period of which they survive, it makes sense that these actually might not be a depiction of what those people looked like, but rather they probably had something to do with sex and fertility. Another recent study looked at the end of the era in which the Gravettians would have survived and noted that there was a sharp increase in population growth during that time period. Women were bearing approximately 8 to 10 children apiece, which is crazy when you realize that their average lifespan was about 25 to 30 years old.
Yes, but that's average. Again, that comes off not intentionally misleading, but that comes off very misleading. Typically, if a person, there's like these points in your life, if you can make it past that age, you're typically okay to a certain age. Like if you can make it past your infancy, you're more likely to make it into childhood. If you can make it past your toddlerhood, you're more likely to make it into early and late teens. If you can make it past your teens, you're more likely to make it into your mid 40s. Well, no, you're more likely, I think it is, you're more likely to make it into your mid to late 20s. If you can get past your 20s, you're usually pretty solid to get into your 40s and your 60s and beyond. And if you can make it into your late 40s, you're definitely good to make it into a more advanced age. The trick here is that a lot of people die in their infancy, their toddlerhood, and their early childhood. There's, death, disease, helped on the way out. I mean, I'm only laughing because I don't have a better way to put it. So I hope you all are just kind of picking up on what I'm trying to lay down, because I really don't want to get too dark about this. But that kind of stuff happened for reasons. And if you can make it past basically your early childhood and your late teens, early 20s, you're usually pretty good to get into your late twilight years. I don't think we had a ton of people living past 60, but the number of people that died in their early childhood and their early teenagehood is so significant compared to the number of people who lived. It skews that number very low. So that's why we're like, oh, the average lifespan was XYZ. But the reality of it is that's the average, because so many people were dying very, very young. Okay. Yeah. It's a misleading number, but it's also not wrong, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So now let's talk about why it's nonsensical for fat activists today to be holding onto this figurine as some sort of idol of the past. First and foremost, our fat activists who are holding onto this piece for dear life are not living in a nomadic hunter-gatherer society. We are living in a society where literally everything can be handed to you in a moment. We live with so much surplus. There is never a need to worry about where food is going to come from. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that there aren't people in the world who deal with hunger issues. What I'm saying is I don't think that those people are fat activists who are on TikTok holding onto this figurine. In fact, you couldn't really just DoorDash food to your igloo or your cave, right? We are so far removed from what it would have been like to live as a hunter-gatherer, let alone to live in freezing temperatures. There would be no need for us to look that way now, even if at some point that was the ideal body size. But let's flip this and say that, okay, what if this is actually what women looked like, even though they were muscular and also had some bone density?
Even though we literally have evidence it's not what they looked like solid actual evidence that is not what they looked like. But go on. I'm here for a thought experiment.
It's more likely that they would have had very swollen bodies, because I can't get too graphic here on YouTube, due to the fact that they were each bearing around 8 to 10 children. Again, to put that into perspective, each of these women was popping out 8 to 10 babies, and they were only living to about 25 or 30 years old.
Again, the number's very skewed. So that's not necessarily factual. Pregnancy was it still is very dangerous for women, though. There's so many things that could go wrong. So my point is, these women were surviving 8 to 10 pregnancies before they either stopped giving birth or they were stopped from giving birth, if that made sense. Did all 8 to 10 of those kids survive? I don't know. That doesn't seem to be a data point we're discussing. But the reason why we didn't have birth control. And you needed to have multiple children in order to ensure that one of them would survive, kind of a thing. So safety in numbers, law of averages, morbid, I understand, but that's just the way it was. So yes, these people had a very short lifespan on average, but again, I've explained why. So these women that were actually giving birth, I would like to know at what age they were at what age they were when their remains were found. Did that make sense? What age they were when they died. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. We can usually get an average idea of what the age was at time of death. I would be very interested to know what the average age was of these women that made it through childbearing, because probably that number is going to be a lot older than this average number is going to be. That's just my gut on that one. So just keep that in mind, please, that these ages are, again, the statistic is not incorrect. It's just misleading if you don't understand how we got there.
Which means they were pregnant for most of their short lifespan. We know this.
They were pregnant for most of their life.
Actually found that during this time period, it was possible for women to produce more children because they actually weaned their babies using baby food made from gruel and milk that was fed to them using small stone spoons.
Ooh,
that
cool.
use of baby food meant that others could help care for the baby while the mother was pregnant again and caring for herself to keep her unborn, healthy.
Okay, so the other reason why I keep harping on people were living longer than this statistic is saying they did is because there's a very well accepted theory called the grandmother hypothesis, and that's one of the reasons why women were able to have more children more frequently and these children survive into adulthood is because of the grandmothers, probably also the grandfathers, but it's called the grandmother hypothesis. So let me have this. And the idea is that the previous generation, being the grandparents, were still alive to be there for the mother's generation. I was going to say child generation, but I'm talking about children. But anyway, so the grandparents were still around and were still healthy and active enough to provide support for a new mother, in that they would also help take care of the babies and the infants after they were born, or the younger children as they got older. And they were also there to be able to pass down generational knowledge, like this is how you tie a knot, this is how you scrape a hide, this is how you start a fire, those kind of things. So without the grandparents part of this, the rest of it would have been astronomically more difficult. There's the whole concept of it takes a village to raise a child, and which is probably also true, but the majority of the village, not the majority, some section of the village were also what we call elders or grandparents. And so I guess be nice to your grandparents because they're the reason you're alive, is my point. But in order to have grandparents, you would have to have adults who are older than the people bearing children. Does that make sense? So that's why I'm telling you that this number is skewed, not by bad data. That's how an average works. But there were more people living into advanced ages than you would be led to believe given that average. A 30-year-old is not the grandparent, okay? That's my point. So,
I don't know about you out there, but like that does not sound appealing to me at all.
hang on.
The way that these women lived is just so strange to me. Like, these women were not doted upon. They weren't getting overweight from being sedentary and being fed grapes by the men, like, while they were popping out these children, right? They were actively pregnant for most of their lives while moving around Europe in the freezing cold and continuously setting up new camps. Like, that, it doesn't sound fun. In my humble opinion, after reading some of these theories and kind of piecemealing some of this together, it seems more likely than not that this had nothing to do with depicting the ideal body at all. But it probably did have something to maybe do with fertility, the way we think of Venus, the goddess, for which this figurine is named. Now, I want to switch gears to talk about the
figure is named after Venus because when it was found, it was clearly female, and at the time, they were like, oh, she must have been beautiful, therefore Venus. So that's why it's named Venus and not just like the chick of Willendorf. So no, it's not named after Venus as far as like the fertility aspect of Venus. I don't think Venus is a fertility goddess. I think she's just a goddess of physical stuff. I could be wrong.
Nonsensical nature of them holding onto this figurine as some sort of relic of past ideal beauty standards, right? Because that's most often what we hear them say. Look at this statue. It shows that at one point fat women were the most desirable.
Look at this one-off thing and don't compare it to all of the other things that are around it. Just look at this one thing that is completely obviously an outlier. Ergo, fat people were desirable. Yes, that's totally how it works.
And I think I find that so interesting because they're so anti-beauty standard as a part of the fat acceptance movement. Right. Even that first creator that you saw says this in another one of her TikToks.
If human beings have a purpose, and that's a very skeptical if, it is not to be beautiful.
Says the person with perfectly sculpted eyebrows. Tell me about how beauty isn't a thing.
I think that would be like, I was going to say low down on the list. I don't think it would even be on the list.
And by this point, we also know that Tess Holliday's whole brand is F your beauty standards, right? Even though she fits most beauty standards except for being fat. I also find it so interesting that these women in the fat activist movement who are often leading very feminist, like pro-feminist talking points are holding on to these figurines that so overtly reduce women to their sexual organs, right? If we go back,
I guess. I mean, I guess in the exact definition of objectifying, it is, but we, again, don't know why those figurines exist, so saying that is not necessarily accurate. I don't know. I don't like that one. I don't like that one.
And we look at some of these figurines. They often depict women only for those characteristics.
Again, I mean, you can clearly see that there's damage here and there's damage here. So at some point, this figure probably even had arms. But like you can tell that at some point this figure had a head and it had feet. This one clearly has a head, has feet. I've never seen this one before, to be honest with you. I don't know if this counts. I've never seen this one before. It's so abstract. I question this one, is what I'm saying.
Often do not have heads, and if they do, they're faceless.
What do you want? Stop it.
And remember that historians noted that these figurines were created with intention and purpose. Why would they not have faces?
Right. but that doesn't mean that they're objectifying things, okay? Like you're meaning in this argument here.
Or hair.
They do have hair, and the reason they don't have faces is because facial features are very difficult to carve. Like, a lot of them don't have fingers either, and they don't have, if they have feet, they don't have toes. So it's kind of not that solid of an argument, is kind of my point.
Or really any other features outside of those specific organs.
Because that's the easiest part of the body. It would be like carving a male statue and it not having a chest, I guess, is kind of my point. I mean, there's plenty of male depictions, prehistoric male depictions that don't have facial features either, but that doesn't mean that they're like reductive or anything like that. I don't like this argument. There's too many flaws in this argument. I don't like it. Sorry, Sam. I don't like this argument.
Even with the Venus of Willendorf herself, she has a head, but appears to be looking down with some sort of hat or potentially braided hair on the top of her head.
Yeah, so, I mean, going off the argument here, it's difficult to carve facial features to begin with, and the hair is so quick and dirty. Like, I mean, it's very detailed in general, but like, it's too hard to tell if this is like braided hair or a cap because of the abstractness of it. But there's no facial features, but that's probably just for ease, not necessarily like because it wasn't meant to have facial features. Again, I don't think she has nipples. So I don't know why those little squares were there. So it's not like the facial features are the only part that were the only detail that didn't get put on there, is my point.
She is faceless and also does not have feet.
She does have feet. They're just very small. Nah, I'm sorry. This argument's not good. This argument's not good at all. I don't like this argument. There's way too many holes in it. There's way too many assumptions being made here. So no, I don't like this at all.
Additionally, look at her arms. They're very small and spindly. They clearly do not accurately represent what this person's arm.
This right here, these are the feet. See how it tapers down? What is this line? Oh, it must be the rest for it. But she has feet, and she may have had further feet as well that have broken off. Okay. I mean, it would be like arguing that she's not fat because there's no depiction of a fat roll on the back. This is the level of the argument the reason I don't like it. Okay. Yeah, her arms are very small. That doesn't mean anything, honestly. You don't know why these arms are small. It could just be for ease. Clearly some attempt has been made to make a defined upper arm, but I mean, compare the shoulder part to the butt part. She's very obviously out of like artistic proportion to begin with. So, I mean, these aren't good arguments.
Would look like if they were indeed molding this from a real model. And again, if these figurines did actually depict real people, why are they only latching onto the one that shows their body type when clearly there were so many other body types, right? We have the long and lanky.
Because that's bias.
Very
that's
thin.
How bias
there
works.
Are some that have very narrow waists, almost like today's like Barbie dolls.
What's it called? Like that's when you start with a conclusion and you work backwards. That's what they're doing. Also, they don't care. They either don't know, which is probably more likely, and if they do know, they don't care because they cherry pick shit. We know they do that. We know the fat acceptance movement cherry picks its data, and they only use data that supports them. And a lot of times they're ignorantly using this data that they find because they're clearly not reading the papers or even the abstracts of some of these papers, because they'll start saying the paper says something that it clearly does not say, or they'll be like, this paper supports this point of fat acceptance, and it's like, it doesn't, though. You just kind of skimmed over it, and now you're just pretending like you have an actual published paper that supports your points. So if they're willing to do that with actual published literature, they're probably not paying too much attention to the fact that there's 200 other statues and not all of them depict Rubenesque women, okay? Just this one, the most famous of them all. And I believe it's because this particular Venus statue was one of the figure was the first one to be found.
There are some that have very broad shoulders. They're all very different. And so it's interesting to me that they just kind of saw the one that they needed to make their argument and they just ran with it. Yeah. And I love that they latched onto this because it has the title of a Venus. And like I said, in Fearing the Black Body, she based most of her arguments around the fact that in Western art, as it developed on the historical side of things, right? So written record, Venuses were known for being plump. They were known for their fertility. And so fat activism has leaned very heavily into that.
Venus is a fertility god? I guess I didn't know that. I thought she was just a goddess of beauty and like sex. I didn't, and I guess you can extrapolate from that, but I didn't think she was specifically a fertility goddess. I can be wrong.
But the problem with that, when you're looking at a prehistoric piece, is that this piece was built tens of thousands of years before the concept of Venus came to exist.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're using things that have now developed today to name an artifact that's much older, which naturally creates a bias within history. And so when you study history and you learn about biases, that's a lot of what they're talking about, is using today's knowledge to define things that happened in the past. And you're not supposed to do that. It's very frowned.
You're not supposed to do it, but it's impossible not to do it. So the other end of that is to be fully aware of your biases and that you are biased and to accommodate for that. It is impossible to not be biased, but it is possible to be aware of your biases and to compensate for that. It also requires a level of self-awareness that I don't feel like a lot of fat acceptance people have. And that could be for a variety of reasons. Well, I'm not going to get into it this video.
Within the historical field. And yet and still it happens, right? A man discovered this figurine, decided to call it Venus. It was something about being improper, the first one that they found. Because by that point in time, religion had come to play more of a part. And so she was immodest because she was showing different parts of her body. Person...
That dirty, dirty figurine, how dare she make the conscious choice to show off those dirty bits of her body. It's a stone statue. It has nothing to do with you. It's like, I can just see the guy who pulled that thing out of the ground being like, harlot.
Who discovered these original figurines has given them the title of Venus, even though, again, Venus didn't exist. Do you see what I'm saying? So it kind of creates a weird tension where we're defining these statuettes as having something to do with fertility and productivity, but we don't actually know that that's true. And history has only become more convoluted as social media continues to become popular, right? And that is something that I struggle with a lot as someone who absolutely loves history, is that literally any person can go and grab this image off of Google, like obese statue, pop it up on their TikTok and say that in some point in history, in yesteryear, right, that fatness was idolized. But the truth is there's literally nothing that backs that up. But it doesn't matter to the person who saw that, had their own thought processes and opinions validated, and now they're going to just hold on to that little thing for as long as possible, even though it's completely false, right?
This is my biggest complaint about TikTok, and it was one of my larger complaints, still is one of my larger complaints about social media in general. It is so easy to put disinformation or misinformation out there, and it is incredibly difficult to correct it after the fact. And it's just, there is so many ignorant people, and I don't mean that, I mean that as in the definition of the word, who are speaking with their whole chest about topics that they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. And they're just like, this is X. And everybody around them just runs with it because it either is something that that person wanted to hear, or they think that person speaking with their chest is an authority. And it's just, it's very difficult to reach the people who have been given the wrong information and correct it for a number of reasons. And it's just like, I have a lot of apprehension about the generations who are coming up with TikTok, especially as a major part of their lives, because there's so much wrong information on TikTok that people believe is true because it's on TikTok. TikTok would never lie to me. I don't know if they're like lying, but they're not telling you the facts because they don't know them. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect. They don't know what they don't know, therefore they think they know everything. And it's going to be interesting to watch society develop with a bunch of people in it who don't know how to think critically and who don't know how to fact check and who just believe whatever their favorite TikToker says. So there's going to be a lot of varying realities in the world going forward, because there already are. And it's just going to be very interesting to see how that works out. Like, are facts dead, or will these people come out of it as they get older and like actually interact with the real world that isn't the internet or TikTok in general? So this is an ongoing thing. It's just in this iteration of it, it's TikTok and social media. But it is making a major impact on society. So
that's the problem with social media. It has the ability to just create these false narratives so rapidly. And when I saw this figurine, I was like, there's literally no way I cannot talk about this on the channel because, you know, history, right? It's my thing. All right, before we end today's video, I just want to share this little tidbit that I found interesting. That is a reminder to me how cool it is to actually study history, because there are always these little things that reveal themselves that are really, really cool. So the thing that I found the most interesting specific to the Venus of Willendorf figurine that we've been talking about this video is that when they did a scan recently to figure out the type of limestone she was made from, they were able to tell that that specific limestone came from either Italy or Ukraine, but the statue itself was found in Austria.
That doesn't mean the statue wasn't made in Austria. It just means the source material came from one of those two locations. That's all that means. Okay?
Which means it's small stature, right? She's a very small statue, was meant to be held in a hand or carried. And
probably, yes. There's some argument that they were worn like pendants as well, and that could also explain the damage to either the feet and or the neck, because that would be like the logical place you would put a cord. Again, it's a theory. It's just a theory trying to explain why there's so much damage to these statues in those two specific spots.
Think about the context of that. These are hunter-gatherers. They're very nomadic people. These statues would have had to have real importance for them to continuously pack them up and move with them. It really makes me wish that we had some sort of written record to tell us what these cool little figurines were used for. All right, that is all I have for you guys today.
Wish in one hand, spit in the other. See which gets full first.
I'm just curious, have you seen them holding on to this historical figurine? Have you seen them latching on to other relics of the past to promote fatness as an ideal beauty standard? I would love to know what you're seeing out there. And
I'd like to hear her opinions on the whole Rubenesque thing. They love to hold up Rubenesque paintings as if that was like the only painter that ever existed in the entirety of like the Renaissance or whenever the fuck he was painting. He specifically painted large women. He was also a one-off. Again, a one-off compared to everyone else who was painting around that time. So there's that. All right, I like Sam's video. Hopefully this all recorded correctly, because God, I don't want to do this a second time. But I like Sam's video. I just think there was one really bad argument there in the middle. But Sam and I were basically saying the exact same thing through the entire video, with the exception of that one really bad argument. And yeah, we have the same opinion on these things. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, the reality of this thing is so much cooler than the fantasy that fat acceptance is making up for it. I mean, that's a eye of the beholder kind of thing. I like this kind of stuff. I studied this kind of stuff. So there's that. But I mean, if you're not moved by it, you're not going to be moved by it. And I don't want to like Peter Pan this topic up for you. What I would rather you take away from this video is not like, oh my God, reality is so much cooler than fantasy. I would much rather you take away that we don't know what these statues are for. We don't know why they exist. And that means that, I mean, it could be that it's the ideal form, but we don't know, and there's no evidence to support that. So you really shouldn't go around saying that definitively that's what this is, because you don't know either. If the people actually studying this thing don't know the answer, you probably don't either, because you have even less access to whatever information you need to make a definitive decision. If you're just deciding because you want it to be that way, that's a you problem. I can't do anything about that. If you want to make a decision based on facts, then the only decision you can really make is we don't know. And that's how things work sometimes. Actually, the majority of time, we don't always know, and it's okay to not know things. It's not the end of the damn world, okay? Things can just not have an answer, and it's fine. I promise. So anyway, if you guys enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you made it this far in the video, put a little, I don't know, put a little woman emoji. Pick a woman emoji. Stick it down in the comments section. I don't care. Any of them. Any of them. We're gonna fill up the comments section with little tiny women. So yeah, put a woman emoji down in the comments section. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And I did say subscribe, did I? Yes, please like and subscribe. Feel free to leave regular comments down there as well. Be respectful, please. I understand that this is one of those topics where people have opinions. So share, but be respectful. And yeah, I will put Sam's original video down in the comment section. If you're not subscribed, go check her out. She makes really good videos and has some really deep thoughts about things that I truly appreciate. Just not that one argument. Anyway, I will see you in the next one. I hope you enjoy, and bye.